Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Council of Elrond. We're back with another breakdown for episode 5 of the Rings of Power. So we're over halfway through the season already, with only 3 episodes remaining, and I feel like it's just kind of getting into its stride this week. We finally got an episode that felt like it gave us everything that we've been asking for, with the main focus on Annatar or Sauron and Celebrimbor in Eregion, and that main plot was then backed up by one of the usual standout storylines in the Dwarves. So, Dave, we haven't spoken about this episode yet at all, but I can safely say that for me, at least, this was the best episode of season 2, without a doubt. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think initially it was a strong ass episode. I do have my quarrels, but we'll get into it.
Oh, okay. Very, very good. Good to hear. So before we do get into that and get into our full breakdown, we're so excited to introduce this week's guest. He's one of our favorite YouTube personalities, and he has amassed a ridiculous number of subscribers, so we're not the only ones that think that he is just fantastic. He is incredibly knowledgeable and eloquent when it comes to explaining anything to do with Tolkien, but his channel also focuses heavily on some of our other favorite fantasy genres, such as The Witcher or Game of Thrones or House of the Dragon, among others. And for anyone who is watching The Rings of Power, he's actually recently done some little bite-sized videos explaining some of the background lore and characters, like the Dwarven Rings or who is Círdan the Shipwright. So if you don't already, please head over to his channel and check out the wonderful content he posts there regularly. I am speaking, of course, about our dear friend Robert from In Deep Geek. So, Robert, here you are. Welcome. Welcome to the stage.
Well, thank you so much. I'm slightly embarrassed by that introduction. It has to be said. It is always an honour and a delight to be here. Excellent people, excellent podcast. I'm really looking forward to this.
Very good. Well, admirable hobbits, all of us are here. So we're going to jump straight into this episode, and this episode was entitled The Halls of Stone. So Robert, I'm going to come to you straight away. Any significance in that title, Halls of Stone?
Well, I think this is referring to Khazad-Dum, but I think that the idea here that they are trying to do is echo a few different storylines, which I think they did rather well. They echoed across Numenor, which is very stone built, and particularly the highlight of what happened there was very much in the stone shrine, and then obviously we come across to Celebrimbor and in his stone tower as well. So I think that that's what they were trying to echo across. And if you wish to go an extra level deep, then you could sort of say Halls of Stone is to say with stone hearts inside as well, which I think is sort of another layer to what we've got going on.
Wow, you went way deeper than I had gone. I was
In
like,
Deep
oh, well,
Geek.
yeah.
Yeah, the dwarves.
That's it, guys. He is in Deep Geek. I was just like, oh, from the Ringverse, the 7 for the Dwarf Lords in their Halls of Stone. So I was like, oh, that's just surface level stuff. But fantastic. So we are going to start there at that point, and we're going to look at the Khazad-Dum storyline. So again, I just love when an episode opens up and you get to see swirling shots around the mountains. I'm like, here we go. We're going into the mines. So we got that. We got some of the mountain views, and then we went straight in and we saw the 7 rings have now been forged. So obviously the last time we saw the dwarves, they were just kind of starting to create the rings. They were in that process, and now here they are. All 7 are in Khazad-Dum with King Durin, and he immediately picks up the blingiest of the rings, and then he starts to hear some like whisperings from the rings, like they're talking to each other. And again, this is where I was immediately kind of going, oh dear, what's happening here? And I think, Dave, I'll just jump to you on this one. Do you think, for me, my initial worry was that they're going to make these rings almost the same as the One Ring from the Fellowship of the Ring, and we saw that as well, like later on, where he forgets that he took off his ring, and he's immediately, it's kind of like it really evoked that scene from the beginning of the Fellowship where Bilbo is like, where have I put my ring? And he's kind of it goes into a bit of a panic. What was your whole overview of that kind of way that they're going with the rings? Do you think that they're doing that? Is it a bit too similar to the One Ring?
Yeah, I think they're just trying to appease to people that might have only seen the Lord of the Rings movies, and you have that sound effect of the whisperings of Sauron throughout the rings. It's just I suppose it's just to give you a little bit of context that these rings aren't supposed to be necessarily good, even though the dwarves aren't. They really shouldn't be corrupted that quickly or at all, I suppose. So that falls into a couple of the gripes that I have with this episode. Is just I like seeing the different ways that they use the rings in the show, like the different powers that they show. But I didn't love how quickly Durin just became this greed monster. I think if they actually made him a greedy character to begin with, then that would have been much better than suddenly now he's just switched to being a person who's charging, English rate taxes. So I thought that was a little bit strange, but I didn't mind it. When I heard the whispering, I think I actually didn't hear the whispering until my second rewatch, and I was like, oh, that's cool. But then, I think it's fine. It's not the best, but also I also didn't notice until this week that Peter Mullen, I don't know, are you guys familiar with Ozark? I just started watching that recently, and he plays the hillbilly Jacob Schnell on it, and I was like, that's how he's so good. He's a brilliant actor. Peter Mullen, this is Durin the third.
Yeah, King Durin. Actually, just to speak about him for a moment, I already mentioned it on this podcast, but I saw a little clip from an interview with him. I just want to get your thoughts on this, Robert, that he said that he was trying to figure out how he was going to play this character. And then after a while of kind of reading the scripts, he kind of was speaking to one of the showrunners. He was like, oh, so am I supposed to be kind of some sort of like junkie king, like trying to get his next fix? And he said this in like, a room in wherever they were recording, and all of the people were kind of a bit like, oh, we can't use that kind of language to speak about whatever. And he said the showrunner was just like, that's exactly what you need to be. You need to be a complete junkie. You're strung out. You're waiting for your next fix. So that's, I think, the mindset he's in when he's trying to record these scenes as King Durin, kind of desiring the ring. What's your view on it? Do you think that's a good way for the show to go? Do you think that they should really follow more what was done in the books, and it shouldn't be as, it shouldn't be as powerful of a draw? Or do you think it's just a good way to go with TV, where maybe this ring should be the most desirable thing?
I would agree. Peter Mullen is excellent as an actor, and I certainly hold up thus far as a dwarf. I think this is the best embodiment of being a dwarf that I've seen so far, actually, on anything. Hat tip to him. In terms of the ring, that's exactly the same language if you talk to Andy Serkis that he came out with when he was talking about how Gollum Smeagol was sort of reacting to the ring. He considered him to be an addict. So I do have issues with this. I should say, before however long we're talking, I suspect I will spend a lot of time nitpicking, but I do have to echo what you said beforehand. The headline is this was the best episode of the season so far. But let's get into the nitpicks. The ring, yes, I think that it's affecting him too quickly. I think this is an issue that we're going to have if you have this massive time compression. For those who haven't read the books, they're compressing 2,500 years into probably about a year or two. That is a massive time compression. And so the impact on him is way too quick. The rings should not be affecting the dwarves that quickly. I'm more than a little uncertain about what the implications are of the fact that he now seems to be distributing the dwarf rings, which is at all not a Tolkien thing. In Tolkien, Saruman grabbed hold of the rings and then distributed them. I think his greed, I agree completely. He should, if they'd introduced him as a greedy character and then kind of like just took it up a notch, then that would have worked so much better than I'm now going to put a 100% sales tax on everything overnight, which is pretty astonishing. In terms, I don't mind that sort of the whispering thing. They did that for the Elven rings as well. That works for me. I've got no problem with it. To be honest, I do, and I also quite like the way that they haven't tried too hard to make this a hard magic explanation for how the rings work, because Tolkien didn't. It was just like it increases your power. So he was already pretty good at sort of doing stuff with the mountain and mining, and this just made him extra good. So I quite liked that. I thought that worked quite well. But yes, the way that it kind of implied that this was like the One Ring didn't really work for me, and the way it seems to have gone very fast paced into this. It was like scene 2 of him with the ring, and suddenly he's unrecognizable as a character. That's given the fact that we know that the dwarves are they're very resistant to this kind of ring magic. Then that just felt off.
Because at the end of the day, we can say that of the rings that were made, the 9 rings worked perfectly to Sauron's plan, but the 7 rings, you would call them a failure, because Sauron didn't realize that the dwarves were going to be as resistant and as strong and strong-willed against the powers of the ring. So I suppose that's one of the reasons why you just said very well there that they've compressed so much time into this very, very short period. But it's almost like they've compressed how long it would take someone to fall victim to the One Ring, I suppose. Even the One Ring, you could see some people that, well, maybe I'm just going to disagree with myself immediately, because I suppose Deagle got killed within in an instant of getting possession of the ring. So, but yeah, the main thing for anyone that's listening is that the dwarves, over however many years, and these rings were passed down from generation to generation, they never really became so addicted to these rings. They didn't get. This is another thing that's going to be an issue. Another small nitpick will be the fact that if Prince Durin, Durin the Fourth, if he is already saying that there's some evil in this ring, and that he's already sworn to his wife Disa that he's never going to wear this ring, how will it get passed down? And
that's what I was wondering as well. Does he have to fall corrupt to this ring now for it to be passed down? Does everyone just get corrupted into wearing this ring? So eventually it's coming down to Thror, and it just seems a bit odd that the first person to wear it is immediately corrupted. So maybe they're going to off Durin the Third, and then Durin the Fourth will use it for good. They've already brought up that maybe it's the wielder of the ring that's not using it correctly, so maybe he'll die and they'll be like, oh, it was just Durin the Third was actually a bit too corruptible himself.
Yeah, but again, as we said, that could work quite well if they showed him to be a very naturally greedy character anyway.
Yeah,
but
true.
We saw that he wasn't.
No, because he didn't even want to dig for Mithril.
That's exactly it. So we were shown it, but we were actually told it also in this episode, where Durin the Fourth specifically said greed has never been his way. So we're kind of going, okay, you've shown it to us, and then also you've told us, but now it's, this.
Then maybe he's secretly a man. If greed was never his way, and he's getting corrupted by a ring of power, then he's clearly not a dwarf.
Man. Before we go on to any of the next dwarven scenes that I wanted to focus on, I had a couple of little mentions of things that I thought that were cool. Was so when he puts on the ring and he's going around and he's pointing, okay, here, dig here, and then they're like, sire, that's a foundation wall, and he's like, are you explaining Delvecraft to me? And I was like, I don't know, for some reason I just loved that comment. I just thought it was cool. Again, I just think Peter Mullen's delivery of a lot of his lines is just top notch. And then also the little speech that he was giving after they've finally broken through and they've got sunlight, and they show these huge chains that are kind of connected to the mirrors that are shining all the light into Khazad-Dum. And during speech, he says, pity those who dwell above, slaves to the sun, chained to its ceaseless rhythm of waking and sleep. In Khazad-Dum we are free of its tyranny. Here we bring the sun to us. It is daybreak once more in our mountain. And I thought that was really cool. I thought it sounded like Tolkienian, kind of. But then at the same time, I was like, you're still kind of slaves to the tyranny of the sun, because yes, you bring the sun to you, but only during the day. You can't bring the sun to you at nighttime. So it's basically you have curtains is what you're trying to say. We don't let the sunlight in at some time. So I was kind of like, it's a really cool sounding speech, but I was like, it's not really the best message, but maybe that's just me. Jumping.
Poor Disa is out of a job as well.
Yeah. Sorry, Robert, did you have something to say?
I just said it's not just you.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay. Fine. Very, very good. So yeah, poor Disa is out of a job because he also mentions how the stone singers can hear the mountain, but with this ring he can see it. He can see every I can't remember what he said, but every crevice and jewel and all that kind of stuff. But going on to the next thing with the dwarves, which was Disa is out in the marketplace. She's buying what's called a tuning crystal. And we learn then about the 50% ring tax or levy or tribute. And then, so that's where we get this. It seems like it's maybe the next day or whatever. And we're like, oh my God, he's immediately taxing his people into the ground. This is kind of madness. And then immediately we get that scene where the ball crystal thing kind of falls and rolls away and goes into this little deep cave where we find this lake. And we get to hear some sort of a monster sort of a thing. Now, I immediately thought, okay, this is the Balrog. But then I heard some people online on Twitter saying, oh, it could be the Watcher. What are your opinions on that question? And also just the way that she discovers this area, Robert?
Well, can I go a step back and just pick up on something you said before first, which is one of the things that I loved about season 1 was the way that they added to the dwarven culture. They had things like this stone singing or whatever it is. I thought that was fantastic. They showed Khazad-Dum at its height. For too long, for too many adaptations, dwarves have been the butt of all the jokes. But here, suddenly, they seem to give them a little bit of a civilization. They seem to show them as a proud and good people. I do start it's a really nagging thing. It just feels now as that they keep on taking them down a notch all the time. We're not good enough to be able to bash new holes in the walls of a mountain. We have to go and ask the elves for help. This mithril isn't a thing that we discovered and is fantastic. Actually, this is something from an elf crystal that came down earlier. It's like all the time it's just like this extra little step down, and now how are they saving the mountain through an elf forged ring? It's just like they got so close to giving the dwarves this majesty, but now every single time they're sort of taking them down a notch. But you were asking about Disa and the sort of the cave. I think I would agree. They introduced the Balrog in season 1. It was an end of the episode thing. We were supposed to go about Balrog, and then they didn't do anything with it after that. So they have to be building on the Balrog at some point, and it sounded like a Balrog to me. I don't know, maybe if I had to say what does a Watcher in the Water sound like, it's more blah 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 rather than I don't know, but it felt like a Balrog thematically. I think it feels like a Balrog. Nitpick, it shouldn't be for another few thousand years, but hey, I suspect they're bringing the third age into the second age for this show on this one. How she found it did feel a little bit. And it's like you say with the speech, is that it looks great and sounds great to start with, and then you just like scratch the surface to sort of, does that actually make sense? Is that she's in the middle of this bustling marketplace, walks seemingly just like a very short way, and she's in some place that she didn't know, and there's the sounds of a Balrog, and it's like, so you can hear a Balrog within just a few meters of your central marketplace. That seems a little bit weird, but yeah, I don't know. The sales tax thing felt very rushed. I think they were going for the comedy moment with her dropping it and going through and stuff like that. Fine, I've got no problems. But then she discovers this, and then suddenly she's completely changed again. She was, as Durin points out, you were all for this ring, and now it's like, oh, now you're all against this ring. It just feels very squashed, as if they could have stretched this out over 2 or 3 episodes, then it wouldn't have felt quite so rushed to me.
Yeah, completely. So as you said there, that she drops this crystal, this bowling ball, and it gets kicked around by a few people. And maybe you're right. Maybe they were going for sort of a comedic element of it there, and it was quite enjoyable to watch. But yeah, it just didn't sit right with me that literally about 15 meters from the marketplace, there's this enormous cavern, and these are dwarves. They would investigate all these little crevices and rocks, and also, as you said, maybe especially if there's a bellowing Balrog in there. Just one more thing to point out, that for me, why I would say that this is definitely the Balrog and it's not the Watcher in the Water, is that Prince Durin later mentions what he says, quote, a nameless evil, ancient and powerful. So he gives those words, so we all know that means Balrog. So again, it could be another thing where the show was setting one thing up, making it really obvious, only to kind of say, no, we actually had pulled the wool over your eyes there, and we were actually, it is The Watcher. So, but I would say, yeah, if I were going to have to put money on it, I would say that will be a Balrog. Anything else with the dwarves? I'm looking at some other things here. One other thing that I wanted to say, again, got nothing to do with the actual dwarf storyline, but in the scene where Durin, the king, has his ring and he's taken it off because he said his hand felt heavy, and then he kind of snaps at Narvi and he's saying, "What have you done with it? Where is it?" and all that kind of stuff. You can see in the background there's an enormous T-bone steak left sitting on the table, and I'm like, that is such a waste. He's just letting that delicious steak go to waste. Like it's untouched.
So unrealistic.
It's about an inch and a half thick, and it's all meat, meat on the bone. And I was like, that's terrible. That's really, really wasteful, and I was not happy to see that at all. But anyway,
one thing that we didn't. If I'm going to give credit to having nitpicked the sort of the writing a moment ago, to try and give them credit, it might be, I hadn't spotted that, but it might be they're trying to show he is so focused in on his greed for gold and whatever else now that he's like leaving juicy food just to one side and not paying any attention to it. So perhaps they're trying to do a little bit of show not tell.
Also, the fact that he is now extremely rich because he's charging such a huge tax and everything. He's just got endless food around him. So another show not tell. I just wanted to point out as well that the actual opening shot of the whole episode I thought was really good with the landscape and the music. And they do like a transition in season 2. We're getting a lot of like map transitions, but the way they transitioned the mountain into the jewel thought was really cool.
Oh, yeah.
And I know we've discussed the rings, and we mentioned that Durin takes the blingiest one, the one with the biggest blue jewel on them. But I actually paused to look at all the rest of them, and I just wanted your guys' thoughts on them, because like I thought they were kind of plain. There's one with a red jewel, I think, and then the others are just kind of like tiny black stones shaped in different ways. Do you think that they look good? They don't look as good as the Elven rings to me.
No, definitely not as good as the Elven rings. Yeah, I kind of feel like they spent all their time designing Durin's ring, and then they were like, "Oh, just whatever, just whatever design you have is fine." I didn't spend as much time investigating that as you. Now, I didn't really look into them in too much detail, so I can't say much more than just the fact that obviously the blingiest one was the one that was right front and center in our screen, and that's the one that he went for. And then the other ones didn't really catch my eye that much at all. I did kind of just have a quick little look, but I didn't pause that to have to look more or anything like that. So I don't know, Robert, any thoughts on that?
No, I mean, I think I'm the same as you. I mean, the only thing we can, I think, take from that is the feeling that they're going to be focusing in on this one dwarf ring, which we kind of guessed already rather than the others, which is about right. The other dwarf lords are elsewhere, send them off and they disappear probably from the story. So actually we're only really going to be caring about this one ring here, which is probably also going to be the case for the 9 in a way. I'm sure they'll show, they'll focus in on a few of them, but are we really suddenly going to have 9 storylines that we're going to be following exactly how the rise to power of 9 people in 9 different bits of Middle-earth? I suspect not. So I understand it. I didn't think they looked bad, but at the same time, they clearly put more effort into that one blingy ring.
It'll just be Theo that they focus in for the 9 rings, probably.
Yeah. Well, either Nazgul or a potential King of the Dead. So we'll leave that for another day. I think that topic. But final thing I was going to say about the dwarves was I feel like in some of the other storylines in Lindon, in Eregion, and in lots of the other areas, were in Numenor as well. I felt this really, especially in season 1. You get like this overview of this enormous, expansive city or whatever, and then you just get the same locations where they're shooting, and it's like it makes it feel very small. Like we spoke about this before in season 1 in Numenor, where they use the same little this little street. They use it like in 3 different scenes. This like that's where the little alleyway where there was like the fight with Halbrand, and then Isildur was running through there at a different time. It's just it makes it feel quite small. I think the opposite happens in Khazad-Dum. I think they're actually showing us more and more different areas. There was one shot where there was this it looked like a huge deep valley or chasm, and it was kind of like a swirling scene with this kind of very steep looking rock. And I was like, that looks very similar to the steps that lead to the bridge of Khazad-Dum, which we get to see kind of falling apart in the Fellowship of the Ring movie. And I was like, that looks like that could be that area. And then we get another shot at one point where they kind of zoom into the window of Disa and Durin's house, and it's like this cool square window with like you can see a light from a fire burning inside, and just different shots. And just it kind of, for me, I definitely feel like the area that feels the biggest, or the world that feels the most real and lived in, is kind of it would be Khazad-Dum. So I agree. Yeah, you agree with that? So I think that is something that they are definitely doing right with the Dwarven story.
Yeah, I think most of my gripes with this episode come with the Numenor stuff, so I'll get into it then. But yeah, a lot of it echoes what you just said, like just feeling like a small, almost theater-like set
right.
when we're in Numenor.
a little bit. And as well with like Linden, where it was just like, there's just this one tree, and that's the only thing that we get to see, really. So,
although
anyway.
One thing that we do, we do talk about when it comes to Gil-galad and some other characters, is that they're wearing the same costumes all the time. I don't think Durin has had a costume change. He's had a cape thrown on, but he's just wearing that same red thing. And come on, you're a prince. You're Prince of Khazad-Dum. Change your outfit. I don't believe it.
Yeah, they're all like Homer Simpson, just like the same. They open their wardrobe, it's the exact same thing every day. Right, we'll leave the dwarves there anyway. So, if again in this episode, if anybody just wants to jump in and say, actually, I'm going to go back to the dwarves at some point, or I want to jump over to Numenor, just go ahead. Feel free to do that. But I will try and keep things going now. We're going to jump over to Eregion, which one of the first things that we get to see was this big reveal that a lot of people were hoping that we would get to see, and we were expecting to see the development of the Doors of Durin, and we were hoping to see this kind of relationship between Celebrimbor and Narvi. At least Dave and I were, for sure. So we get to see that these doors have already been built now, and Celebrimbor is giving a speech, and he kind of makes a little jibe at Narvi to kind of show that they have this friendship, and they can kind of make these kind of little fun remarks about each other. So it seems like that friendship is there, but I was just immediately kind of thinking, oh no, so the doors were already built. We haven't seen this friendship develop, or we haven't seen them on screen that much together, and I doubt we're going to get to see much more of that on screen elf-dwarf friendship very much now. So that was a little bit of a like, oh cool, the Doors of Durin, but then at the same time I was like, oh, we haven't got to see the actual building of them, the coming together of these two races. And also, I don't understand why he didn't reveal the doors outside in moonlight. It didn't really make much sense to me. But Rob, what was your thoughts on this reveal, the Doors of Durin, and any other gripes that were similar to mine?
Yeah, I mean, I feel quite similar to you. It felt like fan service, an attempt to do something that people who've read the books, seen the film, will go, oh, cool, yes, which is something they have done a lot of, it has to be said. Particularly last episode, there was like and here's the Entwives, here's Barrow-wights, here's, and it was just like ticking off a list of things. So this felt a little bit like that, it has to be said. I also didn't understand why you would make massive stone doors in Eregion. Are you then going to like put them on a cart and then take them over to where they're actually going to be built? I thought it felt a little bit forced. Now we just have to think of a sort of a secret code word that only our friends will know. And it's like, no, you're going to write on the door. In fact, it was probably, I didn't look, it's probably written behind them. Say the word friend, and these are doors, friendship doors. The whole point about these doors is that they were created. Just, it's like an open door. All you have to do is literally walk towards them and say friend, and they will open for you. That's what they are, and it's a complete opposite to the doors on the east that have got all of these kind of magical runes preventing people from coming in, stopping anything entering that shouldn't be there. The doors on the west were set up as a welcome for people. So that's thematically what's going on there. And it therefore, again, this is one of these things, it just felt rushed to me. This should be after hundreds, possibly even 1,000 or so years of friendship between the dwarves and the elves. They've been working together, and in order to allow that, they said, well, you're friends, you shouldn't have to be waiting at the door for us to be coming and getting it. No, but you could just come in. It's like the door's open, come in. That's the kind of feel. And given the fact that this was, I think, the first time really that we get Na'vi and Celebrimbor together, for them to be suddenly such great buddies that they can be making this massive door that allows free access between elves and dwarves, given their history, is a huge thing. Again, it just felt a little bit rushed for me.
Yeah, for sure. Dave, same feeling?
Yeah, I agree. Like, I think Celebrimbor said at the very start something about like dwarves and elves working together. Like, isn't that incredible? And I'm like, well, these dwarves and these elves should be working together for a long time. Like, Khazad-Dum and Eregion are tight with each other, So I don't know why he'd be announcing this, and it was disappointing to see Narvi and Celebrimbor on screen together just for the first time, and that's it.
Probably the last.
Yeah, well, it could be the last, but at the same time, literally the next scene, I was like, okay, I had imagined this season to show the friendship of those two, but they're not giving us that, and that's fine. They're just going to be like, here's a cameo, an Easter egg kind of thing, like what Robert mentioned earlier. And that's fine if they just wanted to do that, but like, it's obviously not going to play into the plot at all. So if that's what they want to do, I'm okay with it. But it was kind of needless, but yeah, fair enough if they want to do it. But yeah, I didn't actually think about that. Why is this being built in Eregion, and what are they going to do? Like, bring it all the way to Khazad now? So interesting choices.
Yeah, we'll see what happens.
I do wonder. Sorry to interrupt. I do wonder that it's one of these things with you. When you try and get into the writers' heads, I do just ask myself whether they must have thought this right at, what was it, like episode 1 of season 1 or episode 2 or something, when Elrond is there at the door. Now, you can almost imagine them writing this scene on, and then they're making Elrond stay outside the door. Oh, but hang on, we can't do that because all he has to do is say friend and the door's open for. Oh, let's say this is before they were made. And then we'll deal with that in season 2. So it's actually it's like the risk of going over to my George R.R. Martin fandom. This is like one of those butterflies of decisions that have been made before, that they decided not to do that because they wanted to have the scene where Elrond's kept outside, and the butterfly effect of that is the fact that they're now creating the Doors of Durin at a time and in a way that doesn't quite feel right.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, no, you're completely right in that. I think it's probably a good moment then to mention those other kind of like butterfly effects of these knock-on effects as well, that you could say of one decision that was made, which is now affecting the way other things are going to happen. For example, the decision to create the 3 rings first. Mm-hmm. It didn't really make much sense to me initially, and I think a lot of people would agree. But then now we're seeing that that's having this knock-on effects of, okay, now this is the reason why they're going to want to have the 7 rings, and this is, we're going to have to save the mountain, we're going to have to save the tree or whatever. So what are your just to go back to you for a moment, Robert, what other kind of small knock-on effects do you think we are getting, and what is the potential? Well, some of the stories could be quite interesting, that they're saying, okay, this is like, they're definitely going to have to be more creative in well, they have been creative, I suppose, in showing, okay, now this is the reason why we need to have the 9 rings for men, or the 7 rings for the dwarves. Do you think that it's good for TV, or do you think that this is just in general a terrible decision?
I would say that I can understand why they made this decision for TV. They clearly decided they wanted season 1 to be this kind of mystery box thing. They wanted people to be guessing who Sauron was. It didn't work for me, but I know that for various other people it did work for them. The kind of the knock-on effects that you then, with in terms of the fact that you have Halbrand as a character, and then Annatar appears a bit later, and then you've still got some rings that need forging. It just creates this whole vacuum of information that you have to start adding in extra stuff, because the people within Eregion are not allowed to know that that's Sauron. but everybody outside seems to be able to know, which creates this kind of weird thing. So, okay, how do we need to? Oh, we need to make sure that there are no messages can get through. Oh, well, we better have Barrow Wights appearing then. We need to make sure that they don't just turn around. Galadriel and Elrond, whoever, don't just turn around and go back and warn Celebrimbor. Okay, well, we need to have an orc army coming in then. So you just need to have a whole load of these extra things around the outside of this story to prevent that from happening, because we cannot, and I don't know how long they can carry on this one for, but for the next 2-3 episodes, whatever, that information cannot get into Celebrimbor. He cannot know, actually, that guy's Sauron. In fact, nobody in Eregion is going to be allowed to know that guy is Sauron, or otherwise the whole plot falls apart. So suddenly we've got an army on the outskirts of there. We've got some elves who want to get the message in. We've got the dwarves who could come in, but nobody is going to be able to give that message to them. So that frames what happens for the rest of this season now.
Exactly, and one of the other things that I would say is not just can that information not come into Eregion now, but it was also they had the perfect example of sharing that information when Galadriel first discovered that Halbrand was Sauron, and for some reason she was just like, I'm not going to tell anyone, and you're just going to have to all trust me that we should not deal with Halbrand anymore. And again, that I was like, oh, maybe they're going to explain that decision in season 2, but so far they haven't, and I don't know if it's. I mean, I think they were trying to say that she felt guilty, and he was trying to say, look, oh, how are the elves going to treat you when they find out that you're the reason that Sauron lives? That was not a good enough reason for me, for someone as wise as Galadriel, to kind of go, oh yeah, the elves are going to be mean to me if I tell them that was Sauron all along. But that was serving the plot. It wasn't serving the it was serving the it didn't really make sense, but it was like, okay, in order for this plot to carry on, nobody can know. So some of those little knock-on decisions are, we'll see how they deal with them later on. But I want to jump over then to the whole kind of interaction between Annatar, aka Sauron, and Celebrimbor, because I think that was probably the strongest point and the highlight of this episode. I thought there was lots of really, really cool dialogue and just interaction between these two characters. We get to see at the very start of the whole Eregion plot here, we get to see that Sauron is now pushing for the 9 rings, even though they're celebrating the success of the 7. He's like, no, I can't even wait till tomorrow. We need to get moving on to the 9 immediately. And Celebrimbor is really quite resistant. And he says, this little quote, he says, "It is a game you play, is it not? Sowing seeds in others' minds and then convincing them that the fruit is of their own thought." Again, I thought that was really beautifully put, and I was impressed with Celebrimbor's wisdom and his resistance to Annatar for much of this episode. And I think there was 3 different occasions where he said to Annatar, no, my answer is no, I'm not going to go ahead with the 9. So I kind of was expecting, from what had happened in previous episodes, for Annatar to just be like, okay, now it's time for the 9, and Celebrimbor would be like, yes, let's get straight into it. So I was kind of happy to see this side of Celebrimbor, that he was strong enough to stand up and just, kind of put his foot down, at least for the moment, and say no. So, Dave, any thoughts on that interaction, or just any other overall thoughts of the interactions between these two characters?
Yeah, I really enjoyed the scene, and you actually brought it up there, just the fact that Celebrimbor says no several times. I actually thought this entire interaction between the two characters was probably the best bit of written dialogue, not just written dialogue, but the best written part of maybe the entire show so far, because I feel like nearly every scene the characters are doing what I expect of them to do. They're just saying exposition, or they're being very passive, or they're just doing what each other asks. But it's not like, I know I constantly have been comparing this show to Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon, but like, I want to see real interactions between real characters. And I loved that Celebrimbor actually said, like, oh, you're just like sowing seeds in my mind. And that kind of shocked me. I was like, oh, so is he catching on? And then Annatar's response is like, I thought we were on the one mind with this situation. And then he kind of manipulates again. And then Celebrimbor pushes back. I just thought the interaction was so good. And seeing Annatar manipulate not only Celebrimbor, but like the people around him, I just thought that was really cool as well. And I thought their toxic relationship at the start of this episode, I thought was very funny. Where Celebrimbor's all happy and he's like,
Sauron
"I
was so
encourage
moody.
you." Yeah, he's like, "I encourage you to keep it short," and he's like, "But you never listen." And I just felt like Annabrimbor would be their toxic relationship name. But yeah, I thought I really, really enjoyed the interaction. But you're probably going to get onto it now in a second. But one of the characters that pops up, her name is Myrdania, which is like she's one of the Gwathi Myrdain. And I was like, Myrdania, there is that, like, I don't even know if that's a Tolkienian name at all, but like her name sounds exactly like Myrdain, which would be like Jewel or Jewel Smith or something. I'm like that. At first I was like, oh, that could be a cool name. And then I Googled what Gwathi Myrdain literally translated to. And I was like, oh, that's dumb, because like the only people that are going to get the actual reference would be someone that'll either someone like Robert or someone like me that'll Google it and be like, oh no, that was kind of dumb. Like, just call her anything else. So other than that, yeah, I loved this whole part. Probably the strongest part of the show.
Yeah, for sure. There was lots of as you said there, the written dialogue and just the interactions and characters doing things that well, first of all, as I said, I didn't really expect Celebrimbor to kind of push back so much. So when you get a character doing something that's slightly unexpected for once, it's a welcome breath of fresh air, I suppose. Yeah. So I'm going to just mention another couple of things, and then Robert, I'll come back to you and get some overall thoughts. So obviously Sauron, he's speaking to Celebrimbor and he talks about how he fears Numenor, which I suppose he should. That was quite cool. I enjoyed that. And then Celebrimbor is saying, look, we can't trust men. We're going to just create bigger problems if we give them these rings. Then, the problems that they have now, that's, nothing than what it could be if we do this. So Sauron keeps pushing him, and he says that when push comes to shove, that some men always come forth, and he mentions Erendil and Tuor and Beren. And again, I know it's probably just a bit of fan service, but I was kind of happy just to hear all these people be mentioned. And he says that that we shall find the wisest, noblest, and truest of heart from Numenor to Rhûn. And again, I was just like, all this time I was just thinking, okay, so who are the people from Numenor to Rhûn that are going to become the Nazgul? And I was like, okay, just, I don't know, I was kind of starting to get a bit excited thinking about like, oh, future Nazgul, who are they going to be? And I'm excited to see their fall as well. Then we get to see the part where he's asking, Celebrimbor is asking Sauron if he has changed the formula, and Sauron kind of lies, and he says that it was that we introduced deceit into it, and now we must tell Gil-galad forthwith, and or else we just that's what we have to do. And Celebrimbor is like, oh, we can't tell him because I've disobeyed him. If we do that, he'll never let me forge anything else again. And then Sauron's like, well, the only other option is just to plow straight on with these 9 rings, and we just have to really get into it and
into the maelstrom.
Into the maelstrom, even deeper into the maelstrom, yeah. So I thought, Robert, I'm just going to come to you now and just, what are your overarching thoughts on this part of the episode?
Well, just to pick up on the name first, I actually was okay with Myrdania. Sorry, to sort of coming on the other side of it. Elves often have at least 3 names. When you're sort of going back through Tolkien, they have like their birth name, the mother's name, and also like a name that they get given as they grow up and start to become their own person. So Círdan, for example, literally means shipwright. So you. When we talk about Círdan the shipwright, it's just meaning shipwright the shipwright. I've most of these elf names, like Gandalf is just like elf with a stick. Is like Grand so elf. Basically the fact it's a dumb name actually kind of works for me. So I've got no problems with that. So but I 100% agree with you, Dave, about this. I thought this is the standout bit, not just for me, not just of the episode, of the whole season, and probably all of you had of Rings of Power so far. The best writing, I think the best acting. I think both Charlies did fantastically well. And kind of thematically, I actually found myself not caring so much about the lore here, because I thought they've done this really well. This is good TV, and this is where I come from. Is that I often nitpick about the lore of stuff, but if the TV's good enough, if the writing's good enough, if what they're showing us is good enough, then actually I don't care. I think great, you've made something which is really good in and of itself. And I think here it's just the start. I'm hoping over the next few episodes this carries on, deepens. But the way that we get Annatar deceiving people, manipulating people, I can fully 100% believe that he can come in here, appear to be the good guy, the wise guy. Oh, I'm just wanting to make my rings, give you knowledge. Why are you being so mean? Turning people against Celebrimbors, making them doubt themselves. All of that felt absolutely right to me. Now, I have many quibbles I could say about this, but I actually don't want to, because I think for me it was the feel was right. When I imagine Annatar and Celebrimbor over a long period of time, this felt like a condensed version of that, and it really worked for me.
Yeah, I just want to actually pick up as well on what you said, because it is something that I forgot to mention, is the performance of both Charlies, but especially Charlie Vickers. I just thought the time he took to say a line that he needed to say, I thought was great. And the way he was staring around, his eyes are so menacing, but there was something extra in his performance in this episode that I thought was more full of malice, but also just like full of wisdom. Like it's like he thought out exactly every word he wanted to say. Like at one point, Celebrimbor says, or he's asking, like, did you corrupt the rings or something? And he goes, no. And then he thinks about it for a second, and he's like staring back at him, and he goes, we did. And then I was like, oh, okay, what's going on here now?
But also, to interrupt there, Dave, when he says no, and then Celebrimbor turns around, and you can see his face, and he kind of starts to smile as if this idea is just kind of coming to him now. So it seems like he's kind of just sort of playing it by ear, and he hasn't. Yeah, he's kind of winging it, and he's doing a pretty damn good job of just. So it's just manipulating and deceiving just comes so naturally to him. That's just, so he smiles, he kind of goes, oh, we did, and the letter, and it was you, and basically making him feel like, oh no, it's my deceit has caused these rings to malfunction. So then he needs to make up for it, and that's why he needs to create the 9. And they talk about the perfection of the 3, thrice perfected for our 3rd forging, and that was just a quote that I'd written down there, and I was like, there's so many 3 mentions there. I couldn't really get my head around it on the first listen. But
it's actually a really good manipulation tactic as well in the real world, when you're not just trying to convince someone of doing something, but actually saying, like, you did something wrong, but we're in it together, and it's you and me against the world kind of thing. It's kind of, I know Man United have this tactic all the time where they're like, all right, we're gonna just like protect and look out for each other, and we're not going to care what the media thinks, that kind of thing. So I can't think of the word for it, but it's a good manipulation tactic. So I'm liking it all.
And to quote The Simpsons, especially Charlie Vickers, but especially Charles Edwards. So, because when you said, I want to just mention especially, I thought you were going to say Charles Edwards, because I thought that his performance, I think his face just, he conveys so much emotion in his face. I think they're both doing exactly what they need to do. And Charlie Vickers, for people listening, this is Charlie Vickers is the one who plays Sauron, and he does a lot more kind of straight face, kind of slow to kind of bring his thoughts across. And I think Charles Edwards now, Celebrimbor, he's really starting to show this kind of, we saw towards the end of the episode, he's kind of starting to have a bit of a breakdown, and he's kind of, just there's a lot more emotion on display. I thought that he was really, I think both of them did really, really stand out jobs in this episode. They were fantastic. Jumping on to this character again, this Mirdania, she, of course, we see that she enters this unseen world, and she gets to see Sauron, and she says, this was another part I thought was cool, she says, quote, I saw its eyes, pitiless and eternal. And as she's saying that, we get the sort of the shoulder of her saying this, and we get front and center, we see Sauron, Annatar there. He's just standing in the focus is on him, and his eyes are just like deep black, and he just looks like he is, no remorse for anything. He's completely pitiless and eternal. And I think that we really, I don't know, just that one shot of him, I was like, this is exactly what I wanted to see from Annatar. So as I said in the intro, I think this episode, they're really starting to give us exactly what we were hoping that we would get. And so just 3 more episodes of this, please, to finish off season 2, and we'll all be happy campers. What was next? So obviously then Prince Durin arrives, and he kind of tells Celebrimbor, okay, I don't trust this Annatar. So I think we're starting to see Celebrimbor, he's sort of losing a bit of control of the situation. He's like, okay, I've let him in, I've kind of given him a higher ranking position than me, and now I don't know if that was a good decision. He's going to start to doubt himself. But so I'm interested to see how that's going to play out. And then let me see. So we get to see Annatar then deceiving Myrdania, and he's blaming Celebrimbor, and he says that all of this work has left him diminished and vulnerable to the shadow. And so she's like, oh my god, it's actually Celebrimbor that I saw. And so the way he did that as well was fantastic. And then he starts to flatter her as well and be like, oh, you've really reminded me of Galadriel there, and is touching her hair. Everybody knows that the hair of Galadriel is like this amazing thing. So everything about Annatar and Sauron in this episode was really, really good for me. The other thing then, Celebrimbor is speaking to Sauron at one point, and he's speaking about how something is wrong with the Dwarven rings, and he says, Sauron says, just be mindful that someone is not manipulating you. I thought that was like hilariously done as well, and it's a great tactic to just, keep on deceiving and to manipulate someone, to be like, hey, you should really be on the lookout that somebody might be manipulating you. I'm giving you this information, so clearly I'm not the one that's doing it, but really, really well written. And then where are we? Oh, yes. I just wanted to read this other little speech that was towards the end, where Celebrimbor is starting to lose the plot a little bit. And he is blaming his smiths for having messed up with the Dwarven rings. And he says, did hubris and sloth come together to dull your attention? We must atone for our mistakes in the only way we can, by completing the rings together. The 9 must do far more than bring aid to men. They must bring balance to the entire project. They must draw strength from the 3 and somehow redeem the 7. They must redeem us all. And at that point, the ring music starts to enter. And then he says, we shall work night and day, new designs, new alloys, a new process. I will be with you at every turn. And if any of you offers so much as a hair's breadth less than his utmost effort, is a smith of Eregion no longer. Have I made myself plain? And again, here we're seeing, as I said, when the music of the ring came in as well in the background, it kind of just, it's tying it all together. And then he kind of goes off, and he's really kind of, agitated and shaken, and Sauron swoops in and he gives this little speech. He says, my friends, do not be discouraged. Your master may seem unreasonable, his demands intemperate or even impossible, but that is simply because he knows how much depends on your success. Yet I know you will not disappoint him or me. Sauron continues then, and he says, I for one am certain that we will complete the rings of power. Shall we begin? And again, he's just really kind of, as soon as Celebrimbor has kind of beaten them down, he's just like picking them up. He's like, guys, don't worry, poor Celebrimbor, he's not having his best day, but don't worry, I'm here and you can all count on me. And everyone is really, you can see everyone's going to start getting on board with Annatar. They're going to start to think, okay, Celebrimbor is losing the plot a little bit. We already know that Myrdania starts to think that he is evil. She might mention to some of her co-workers, I think Celebrimbor is, we need to be careful with some of his decisions. We should start to trust Annatar more. So yeah, it's all turning out very nicely there. Robert, sorry, I was speaking for quite a while there. Any thoughts on those last little bits there? That kind of the way that they had that little speech, and where it's kind of good cop, bad cop with Annatar and Celebrimbor there?
Yeah, I don't think I can add much to what you're saying. I thought it worked really well. The whole thing, I think, yeah, Charlie Edwards works really well. I can see, and we can feel his descent. We're still in early days, I'm sure, based on what we've seen in trailers and the like. He looks a whole lot more distraught later on, but he's making these speeches that it feels like exactly that he's just parroting what Sauron and what Annatar has told him, and does he even really believe what all of this is, or is it just that that's what is in his head? And the fact that we are not 100% sure where he is in his head, I think that works fantastically well. And Annatar coming in and sort of saying, "Yeah, I know he's just a little bit tired, poor guy," but taking over the role of being the person that they trust, I think works well, because certainly, and in this bit in Tolkien's wider writings, he's got a few slightly contradictory sort of scribblings here and there, but certainly in one of them, he gets all of the Smiths basically to launch a coup against Galadriel, who happens to be there at the time. So this kind of feel that we get, he is winning not just Celebrimbor, but the entirety of that cabal of Smiths over onto his side. That really works for me.
Yeah. Really, really well done, I have to say. Now, before we jump onto the final plot, which is Numenor, we do get one little small arc of Galadriel and Elrond and things like that. We see that Elrond is running as fast as possible to get to Gil-galad.
Tom Cruise in it.
Yeah, he just like throws off his cloak while he's running, and he comes in and he tells Gil-galad that Galadriel was right. It's just something that he shouts out. And I don't know what's going on with Elrond in this season. He's kind of flip-flopping over and back between I hate Galadriel and now she's right. And she's just, in the last episode we saw that she basically sacrificed herself for to save her company. And then as soon as she sacrificed herself, what could be her death, Elrond's just like, it was just for the ring. It wasn't to try and save us. It was to try and save the ring. So that's his last interaction with Galadriel. Then he sprints to Gil-galad and it's like, Galadriel was right. So I'm like, what is he actually thinking in regards to what are his opinions towards Galadriel in this moment? So I'm a bit confused as to what Elrond is doing when he seemed to be kind of the wisest and one of the best characters of season 1. He seems to have kind of lost his way a little bit. But we also then get to see Galadriel arriving, meeting Adar. And again, there's this potential ally situation where Adar says, I brought you in as a potential ally. And I don't know where that's going to go. I'm hoping that we don't get to see Galadriel and Orc team up. That would be disastrous, I think. So, but I don't know. Anything's possible. Dave, any opinions on that before we jump to Numenor?
No, not really. I think I did see a crazy theory online that Adar could be Celeborn. So I don't know. I think that's obviously a bit stupid. But one thing about that Gil-galad scene where I've mentioned before how I really like how they're showing the powers of the ring, but his ring was so weird. Everyone gets like a little bit of foresight and visions with their rings, but he kind of his is set to like the Discovery Channel or something. It was so weird where we got that crazy like climate change documentary footage of like the fish and there was like all those kind of weird shots, kind of like some sort of Nazi torture propaganda like being shoved into your brain. I don't know, that was very off-putting for me.
Orange.
It wasn't shot the same way anything was shot in the Rings of Power so far, so I thought that was bizarre, and I don't know what he's envisioning. Possibly the dried up river around Eregion that the orcs are going to attack through. I'm not really sure, but I thought it was a little bit bizarre. But and also, you mentioned it there. What's Elrond throwing off his cloak for? Is that weighing him down and he needs to run extra hard now? So, but anyways, I don't really have too much to say other than those little gripes.
Unless you want to jump in on that, Robert, I might move on to Numenor.
I'm happy to move on to Numenor.
Perfect. Okay, very, very good. We'll try to get through Numenor as fast as possible. And here we do open up, but we get to see that with the last time we were in Numenor, we had this, people were chanting for Pharazôn, and now we open up, we see that he has got the scepter and he is now the king of Numenor. He has taken that and he has taken the title of Ar Pharazôn. So if anybody was wondering, when they refer to him as Ar, that Ar means high, and that is, so he is now, that's his title of being king. And it opens up with him and the Melonhead's favourite Kemen on screen, and they're having a little chat, and they're Farazan says, have you ever seen it? Across our western seas, the White Tower of Erisea, the very gateway to the undying lands. Only the keenest eye can, and only from the peak of the Melantarma. I reckon the elves placed it there on purpose, so that every sunset serves as a reminder that our days must end, and theirs will not. But no matter how high we climb, some things will be forever withheld from our grasp. Again, this is exactly, again, what we kind of want to see, or what I want to see at least, of this idea of Numenor sort of becoming angry with the elves because of their eternal lives, and that, you know, we are men, we have got to the very peaks of our powers, we've built these enormous cities and we've built these great things, but now we have to die and we can't enjoy them forever. It's not fair. These people across the water, they can just, you know, do whatever they want and they get to live forever. And basically the jealousy and that envy is what builds up, and it's not because elves are coming to take their jobs or whatever. It's more of just, you know, that the eternal nature of the elves is what really is the seed that sows the jealousy. So I thought that was a really cool and strong opening with Farazan. What did you make, Robert, of Farazan in this episode? Do you have any thoughts on the way his character is going? Do you like what you're seeing from the actor? And what are your views on that?
Well, I would agree completely with what you're saying. This is what I want. This is the motivation that should be guiding the King's Men, the majority of the Númenóreans, through the rest of the age, through the rest of the show. And it's a far cry from like the season one elves coming over here stealing our jobs kind of that I really didn't like that. So as far as I'm concerned, this works as a reset. Now, there are going to be, again, butterfly effects of things like the timeline compression, because in the books, spoilers, but in the books, then the Númenóreans, at some point, Sauron's army is going to be sweeping across Middle-earth, and the Númenóreans come and join up with the elves and help push Sauron back. But that doesn't seem to be the way that Farazan's foreign policy seems to be going at the moment. So we'll have to see how they handle that. But yes, I think this is the feel I want for Numenor. This is where they should have pitched it to start with. It's slightly belated that it's arriving now, but I'm very happy if they are going to be playing up now the talking of the Valar. Though we never really had talk of the Valar before. It was just like, do you like elves or not like elves? Which isn't as deep or as majestic as the themes that we've got going through Tolkien's work here. So I'm taking this as a big positive step in the right direction. I have nitpicks about what sort of how they handle it and things going forward, but I don't want to take away from the overall feeling, which was that I almost punched the air when they were there, like giving a little speech about the can you see Tol Eressëa? This is how the elves are mocking us. That whole thing, yes, absolutely. That's what we want from now on as motivations and a feeling. And I really liked this idea that he's there. He's now king, but it's like, is that enough?
He's still not satisfied.
What's the next step? Exactly, and that I can now see where this is going. Whereas in season one, I couldn't really. It just felt like we don't like elves because they got pointy ears and then they take our jobs. It's like, no, there's more layers to this, and now I can see it. So good, yes, well done them.
Yeah, for sure.
I just wanted to jump
that for them.
I wanted to. You just brought it up there at the end, but the fact now that he is king, and the first thing he does is have a speech about how the elves are mocking men. I thought that was really good because it finally gets the audience up to date of the motivations of Farazan as well. And I just the season one, we've talked about the butterfly effects, but yeah, that was a major butterfly effect in season one, just like the whatever was going on with Numenor, but also then the whole Halbrand mystery boxing that kind of shook the core of everything to happen afterwards. If they just did this season now as season one, or everything that's going on in season two as season one, it would be a lot better. But I did really like this scene. This is probably one of my favorite scenes that we've had in Numenor all season, and there's only two people on screen. I thought it was really good. It was kind of reminiscent of Mufasa and Simba and looking out. And I have to point out as well that when they talked about Tal Erisea, we heard Bear McCreary's Valinor theme coming in, but it was actually played in a minor tune, which was really beautiful and really nice. But yeah, I did all. We could move on, but also that was kind of weird, that whole speech talking about his mother and just being like, yeah, I'll tell you if you do this one thing. And yeah, poor Kevin.
And just, it's a weird prophecy for a mother to have when she's breastfeeding. It's like, I think he's going to come to an ill end, this child. It was a bit strange, all right. But I would also say I want to give a shout out to the costume department as well, because I thought Farazan looked really, really cool in the scene as well. He had...
That's cool.
Just, again, for costume changes, I think Farazan has had some of the best ones so far. I mean, Gilgalad...
At least three.
He only wears gold. But, Farazan, he's had at least three, I suppose. We've seen him in blue, we've seen him in red, and then he was wearing this kind of silvery, kind of with red tinges going on. But I just thought he looked really, really class. So, definitely like that look for Farazan. Kemen is starting to show a little bit of agency and a little bit of purpose to this character. He kind of tells Kemen, okay, you need to prove yourself worthy now, or else I'm going to find another position for you, another use for you. So and then we get to see, of course, him being a huge dick later on, basically. But to put it in, just I'm not going to sugarcoat it in any other way. But we do get to see that Miriel is taking up where her father left off. She's stranded in the tower. She's outcast and she's ousted from her throne. She has a little chat with Elendil about the vision in the Palantir, and he says that he saw something different. So she's kind of like, oh well, if what it's showing has changed, maybe this is the correct path. That maybe Farazan takes over, and maybe this is what was supposed to happen. So don't really know what to make of that, but that happened anyway. There was a weird kind of dynamic though between these two characters. I was like, are they going to kiss, or what's happening here? I was just really worried. She
keeps touching his chest, but I think that's because she's blind. But
he could read that the wrong way, but like, oh,
I know.
So I don't know.
I quite liked that. To be honest, I quite liked that. Despite my law reservations about any kind of relationship between them, I quite like the fact if she's blind and she put her hand on his chest, and then he kind of looks down, and it's like, is that, and we're thinking the same thing as him, which I think is really good, which is that is it just because she's blind and she wants to check I'm there, or she's leaving it hanging for a little bit longer now, and then he's like, he starts to bring his hand up, and then she takes her hand away because she can't see that he's bringing his hand up there, and so she thinks that he just left it and he didn't do anything. And so actually that as a little bit of showing us what's going on there, I thought, yeah, that's all right, I'll allow that, because we're going through the same thought process that they are. They feel a bit like slightly awkward teenagers, not really quite sure how to express feelings and thoughts. Is like, if I just put my hand there, is that, no, I'll take it away, he didn't like that. That was the kind of feel that that I got from it, and I thought it was good.
Yeah. Okay. So nothing. I mean, if I were Muriel and I heard Elendil speaking about Numenor with his amazing voice, I mean, I'd be like, This guy's cute. So jumping on, the Sea Guard has been disbanded, and Elendil has been stripped of his position by his daughter Eärien. And again, I don't really understand Eärion's character. I understand where they want her to go, but it seems like too much of a massive shift and a jump for, she's this loving daughter, and now suddenly she is, telling her father basically that he needs to watch his step or he'll get thrown in prison or worse. And so she seems to have taken it's just maybe time compression is the reason why all of this just seems way too rushed. And that is, again, as we've said, that is one of the knock-on effects of this time compression since day one. All of these kind of things that should kind of develop, and a person's character can change over a long course of time, but when you try to say, okay, today she's this and tomorrow she's something else, it seems, and there's no magic ring to cause her to have had such a change of heart, I suppose. So this was a really cool scene. I liked where Elendil was kind of "Oh, Captain, my Captain," I suppose, to take from the Poet Society. But
Yeah.
I enjoyed that where just they shouted "Captain leaving deck" when he handed back his sword, and then they all stood to attention, and I just thought that was really cool. Of course, Kemen comes in and he's like, he's no one's captain now. So but then they still were like shouting. I captain when he was walking away, and they were just not paying attention to Kemen, which also made me quite happy. I thought that was just a really, really cool scene. Dave, what were your feelings about that scene with Aerion, that conversation, but then also just like that "Oh, Captain, my Captain" scene, as I've referred to it?
Like, it was grand. I like what they're trying to convey. The "Oh, Captain, my Captain" thing was quite cool, and I liked Elendil's performance, or Lloyd Owens. But this is what I referred to earlier in the episode when I talked about Numenor. Always kind of feels like it's almost like a theater thing where there's one bad guy, Ar-Pharazôn, and his lieutenant, aka his son Kemen, and then Aerion is his little helper, and like, so therefore Kemen and Aerion have to be everywhere doing all the things that they should be, I don't know, discussing things in the palace, or they shouldn't be out in the streets with the guards making sure that the captain is stripped of his titles. And also just the set itself as well, it looked like another alleyway again, and it looked like there was 30 people there at most. And on my second rewatch I was pausing every now and again, or else I'd be looking in the backgrounds trying to find other things happening, but it just seemed like not much was happening other than this exact thing that we're supposed to be seeing on screen. Also, Elendil skipped the entire queue when he just dropped his sword. Like, everyone's queuing there for hours to drop off their belongings, and he just takes his sword out and goes right to the front and just dumps it down. So no respect from the captain anymore. But yeah, other than that, like, yeah, the performance is good. Aerion is kind of weird to me, like the fact that she's changed from, she thinks she's mourning the loss of her brother, and instead of taking solace with her father and sticking to him, we kind of predicted this last season. We were like, oh, she's probably going to turn and be against Isildur and Elendil, but I did not think this would be the reason, just because I don't even know what her reasons are, because her father doesn't seem to, because her father is siding with the queen that she hates. But why does she hate the queen?
She's blaming the queen completely for sending the fleet to Middle Earth.
So what?
But she's not blaming her father. Well, maybe she is a little bit as well, but she's not blaming Isildur, or he volunteered to go. I don't know. Yeah, again, it's just the result of her anger doesn't really justify the means, basically, and it seems a bit too much, and it seems way too quick and too drastic.
But like in season 1, we got to see. Didn't we see Pharazôn, he was at the time, eventually siding with Elendil and Miriel at the time? I know this was just for his later game, but he was like, we will send people to Middle Earth, and he made some big speech, some big grand speech. So on the surface level, it looked like he was also for this. So why is it suddenly now the Ar-Pharazôn versus the Queen? Like, it's not strong enough, this whole plot, for me to actually believe what the common people are believing. Like, why are people siding with Pharazôn? Is it because of that eagle thing, which I didn't love either? Weird. But yeah. But anyways, I'm not gonna harp on too much about it. So those are my 2 cents on that scene.
Right. Okay. I'll jump to the final scene. The most important thing that happens in Numenor in this episode was when they're in this temple, in this shrine area, and they're having a ceremony for the dead who fell during the battle. And Kemen arrives in, of course, and he breaks up the ceremony, and he tells them that they're going to be putting a new aqueduct in this area, so we have to destroy the oldest shrine in Numenor. And of course, there's a fight with Valandil, and he ends up killing Valandil. And again, although some of it was quite good, I didn't believe for a second that he could overpower Valandil and almost drown him, where Valandil is like way bigger. He's a hardened soldier at this point. Kemen just looks like
he's a lieutenant as well.
Well, he just looks like a little prince who's just been in a palace all his life and has never seen any sort of physical altercation, never mind fighting one of these guys he's Valandil is a lieutenant in the Sea Guard. So I didn't really. I mean, some of the action was quite good, and some of it I did enjoy. But again, just the whole time in the back of my head, I'm kind of going, "There's no way. There's no way." Of course, then the scene where he it was great to see him breaking Kemen's arm. That was cool. And then he decides not to kill him, which is probably a wise decision, I suppose, when the guards are all standing around. And then, of course, Kemen just stabs him in the back, which was pretty terrible and pretty horrible. And Robert, I'm just going to get your thoughts on this whole scene in this shrine and general Numenor opinions.
I think the general Numenor opinions, I would definitely agree. It still feels a little bit small. The same people, as I say, just like these people have to be hanging around and looking at things. No, they don't. This is why you have lots of lackeys and flunkies to be doing this kind of business. But my lore nerd bit doesn't like the fact that Tolkien was quite clear that the faithful, they didn't have temples, they didn't have priests. That looked to me very much like a graven image of Nienna, one of the Valar, which then there was some kind of line from the priesty guy about, but the wishes have to come back to her. She has to be put back in her box or it doesn't count. And that
we lose the souls. Yeah,
exactly. That's wrong. Exactly. We lose the souls. I mean, what does that even mean? So all of that bit I didn't like.
Sure.
I think they created this as a way to show Kevin, Kermit, whatever his name is, he comes in and he's the bad guy. He's not just doing it on the streets, grabbing them and taking them off to prison. He's actually going in to say, we're building a motorway through one of your sacred sites. The sacred site should be the top of Mount Melntama. That is where the sacred site is. So that would have worked hugely well for me. So I don't know why they didn't do something along those lines, but maybe they felt they'd need to explain it a whole lot more than something that feels like a temple that we might understand. So didn't particularly like that stuff. I didn't particularly like, as I say, the fight. It's like Kemen should not be. He's not a fighting person. This is where he's got the soldiers along with him. You get the soldiers to do the fighting, not you. He will know that this is an actual soldier he is fighting, a sailor. He's somebody who's used to using a sword. Why on earth is he attacking him? That didn't make sense. But the whole thing, as I say, with what I said earlier about Numenor, they're setting this on the right path now. This is now no longer just like we don't like elves. This is like making it very clear that we have the majority, the king's men. We heard that phrase for the first time. We have the faithful. The faithful are being sort of hounded out. They're having to go into hiding, basically, because there's a crackdown on their beliefs. That is exactly where we should be going with Numenor. So I have quibbles with how they did it, with what it looks like. But in terms of the overall, what felt to me like a reset, this is where I want it to be going now.
Yeah. That's exactly right. So it's kind of like they've set it up perfectly. So we know now that there's going to be this internal civil war almost between, what I thought about the ceremony and the reason it was in this kind of, it looked almost kind of like a basement or like a catacomb kind of thing. It seemed almost like they know now that they need to hide any kind of prayers that they're doing to the Valar or any little faithful ceremonies. It seems like they know that maybe that's already been all outlawed and they have to do it in these kind of hidden places. But maybe not, because they did speak about it being the oldest shrine. But for me, when I first saw it, I thought it was just like they were hiding in a basement and they were having this little ceremony. But Dave, any final thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I'm not going to echo all the lower points that Robert had. I just wanted to, again, speak about like the more surface level things that I just didn't buy. I didn't believe, just the lack of people that were in the room. I thought like Elendil punches... It's
always the problem with Numenor, really.
Elendil punches Kemen, the son of the king, in the face. And then everyone just stands there and waits for Kemen to feel his lip. And then he turns and has to tell his guards to hold him. And, that's just not a thing like in Game of Thrones or anything like that. That's an immediate
If you're like part
execution.
of the Secret Service, if you're part of the Secret Service and someone comes up and like punches
the president,
the president or something, you're not going to like stand around and be like, should I hold him or are we good? What's happening? It's
And
it's the same as what we said with it's the same as what we said about during the coronation of Muriel, when that woman just slapped her in the face. And we were saying,
so I was going to say,
if this was Game of Thrones, like, that woman would have had her hand chopped off instantly, or maybe just she would have been killed or whatever. It's just, and then Muriel's like, no, it's okay, I'm going to just give her a hug. And I understand why they're doing that, but I just don't think that it worked very, very well. So
but just even everything that happens in that scene, like, so the guards hold Elendil, and then Kemen gets to get a free punch at him, but Valandil can just walk up to him and stop his punch on Elendil. Like, where are the guards? And then later, when we see Valandil about to kill Kemen, Elendil's being held back by one guard with one arm, and he's just like, it looked like, when you're really like doing that, hold me back, guys, hold me back, as a joke. And he was literally being held back by one arm. And also, then when...
Did nobody else see Kemen as well, standing up and picking up the sword and said, hey, look out behind you, kind of thing? But
well, I don't mind that, because that's kind of a movie trope, and, like, all the guys in the room were guards, but that's fine. Like, but what I did think was shocking is Kemen gets, attacked and his arm is broken, but, like, the guards, I paused again, looked around. All the guards are literally standing around and just watching. One guy is actually leaning on his spear. He's just like chilling and like half leaning on a column, half leaning on a spear. So I just found it hard to buy that scene. But overall, I do have to say thank you to Alex Tarrant. He's the guy that plays Valandil. I thought he was particularly really good in this episode, and it made me, I actually was saddened to see him die, because I just felt like he was a really good character, someone I really believed. Again, in season 1, I thought his chemistry with Isildur was quite good, and I'm genuinely sad to see him go. So shout out to you, Alex.
Yeah, but I'm glad that they kind of gave him a cool on-screen death, I suppose, and he went out, as like a kind of a hero or a martyr. So
absolutely.
It's better than just getting, an off-screen death or something like that. But we are coming to the end now. So before we finish, we're going to just wrap up by looking at what were our best or our worst moments or characters in this episode. So Dave, I'll just come straight to you first. What was your best moment from this episode?
My best moment was probably Charlie Vickers' performance as Annatar. I obviously like Charles Edwards too, but like seeing Annatar manipulate everyone around brilliantly. I know it's a little bit more of a general best answer, but like I just thought this was probably some of the best writing of the entire show, so I loved that. Overall, I thought this episode was probably one of the strongest, and coincidence, I don't think so. There was no hobbits. There was very little of Galadriel. Do with that what you think. But we discussed last week as well the lack of screen time for the likes of Khazad-Dum and Annatar as well in this season. But they were absolutely plentiful here, and that's, give the people what they want. That's exactly, we want to see more of the lore adjacent things, and I think that's what we got in this week's episode. So yeah, that's my 100%. Best answer.
100%. Yeah, very, very good. Robert, best?
Yeah, actually, just to pick up on Valandil, because I didn't mention it. So one thing I had not figured out, probably because I'm just a little bit dumb, but until just now, is that I think they did a really cool thing, because Isildur in the books, he names his third son Valandil. And actually this cuddly makes sense, is that, this was his mate who died. Suddenly you go, okay, yeah, I get that now. So if that was the thinking, rather than just let's just pick a random name, if they were thinking ahead and going, okay, so we want who might Isildur have named his son after, let's give him a friend who dies tragically, then hat tip to the writers. I thought that was good. But in terms of what I loved about this episode, it comes as no surprise the Annatar, Celebrimbor feel. It was just right, manipulative, and it just made your skin crawl. But it also felt inevitable what was happening there. Exactly the right feel. And I genuinely, while watching it, I didn't care at all whether or not this was sticking true to Tolkien. I thought this is just good TV. So that's the bit I love the most.
Yeah, right. Well, we're going to get 3 for 3, I think, on this because, yeah, for me, I'd have to say exactly the same and just echo your guys' thoughts on that. It was really, really cool just to get a couple of little quotes about how Celebrimbor said that Sauron was sowing seeds in others' minds and then convincing them that the fruit was of their own thought. And then also Sauron at one point saying to him, "Be careful that no one's not don't let anybody manipulate you," and those kind of things where these are just really cool things that I'm just so glad that we're getting to hear from these characters, and just the feel of these characters. I can say that I'm just so relieved almost that I can feel confident now going forward in, okay, they're doing this the correct way. And because if the character of Sauron and that kind of dynamic between Annatar and Celebrimbor, if that didn't work, this season was kind of just doomed, I suppose. So thankfully that I'm really excited to see where they go with this, and I just can't wait to see more screen time between these the two Charlies. So fantastic, Dave. What then was your worst moment in this episode?
Again, I don't want to be just general, and I usually like to pick out a very particular thing, but I think Numenor for me, it's quickly the comparison from this season to season 1, where I just remember you and I, every single breakdown episode, we were like, oh, Numenor, it was amazing, the music and the grandness and the scope. But now we're over that. We've had the music, the grandness, the scope, but like I just feel like everything that's happening there, other than Elendil and his performance, I thought in this episode, Ar-Pharazôn's scene was brilliant at the beginning, and his scene where he touches the Palantir, I thought was kind of cool. It was only tiny, but all in all, I just feel like I don't buy the characters. I don't buy the people that are there. I find it unbelievable. People's motivations for backing Pharazôn, and I really hope that it starts to pick up. This episode might have been a small turning point, so I just hope that it can redeem itself, as Annatar would say.
Yeah, very good. Okay, Robert?
Yeah, mine's more the sort of the conceptual doing down of the dwarves, which I kind of mentioned a bit earlier. Is that I really loved what they did in season 1, just giving them more of a civilization and a culture. But now we seem to be, the dwarves fall under the power of the rings incredibly quickly, which they shouldn't do. In order to dig a hole through what seems like just a meter or two of rock, then they need the power of the elven rings, not all of their millennia of expertise. It just felt like it was sort of taking it down a couple of notches. So it's probably not the thing I disliked the most per se, but because I did like the dwarves so much before, to be seeing it taken down a few notches was disappointing for me.
Yeah, it's a very, very good point. I think for me, there was a couple of small things. I think maybe Aarion, I don't know, her promotion suddenly to this like position where she's now ordering her the captain of the Sea Guard around and like just disbanding the entire Sea Guard altogether, and the way she's treating her father and just her kind of her changing character so suddenly, without it being okay. The King Durin's change of character is dramatic, but there's a ring of power behind that, so maybe we can just say, okay, the rings are more powerful than they should be in this like way of making people greedy. But at least we can say, okay, that's the reason for his change of character. Whereas Aarion's is just like, yeah, again, we've said this before, that just it's not really making sense. A lot of the plot are like the reactions to a particular situation don't feel very natural. So I think that I was just going to have one quick mention of, again, just seeing that delicious steak going to waste. That was one of my worst scenes. I think I was just like, oh, I think I was really hungry when I was watching the episode. I think maybe that was something behind it. But yeah, so I think we should leave it there, guys. I think we could easily talk about this episode for another couple of hours, but we're not going to bore our listeners to death. So that's it for this week's episode. We have to say a huge thank you again to you, Robert, for coming on. Remember, everyone, we're going to have all the links to Robert's channel, which is In Deep Geek. We'll have them down in the description below. And yeah, really, really wonderful content on there always. And it's such an honor to have you on, and we're delighted to get to chat to you again. And apart from that, I think we should just say to everyone that just Keep getting in the comments, keep letting us know what your opinions were of this episode. Are you happy with the direction that they're going with the different storylines? As we said, maybe Numenor can be a little bit flat sometimes, but at least I think they're setting it up to go in the right direction.
Comment best and worst moments as well.
Yes, exactly. Always let us know what were you as affected as the steak going to waste as I was. I think that was just me. There was also what looked like a delicious fried tomato on the plate as well, just to let people know that as well. So yeah, really, really delicious plate. I'm going to stop talking about food. So yes, everyone, please, as I said, get in the comments and let us know what you thought. But for now, from myself and Dave and Robert, we will see you all again soon.
Bye, guys.